this week, Thursday, Friday, and then Monday, are our 3 training days to prepare teachers to appropriately administer remote learning for our students. And then school is supposed to start officially for everybody on September 1st, first grade through 8th grade. So what we are doing, and this is part of the materials that were distributed to all parents, we are utilizing Tuesday and Wednesday of next week, the first 2 days, to engage students with their teachers, make those connections. We're also seizing the opportunity to distribute Chromebooks and, as Mr. Morrow referenced, handing out other curricular materials, including books. There are going to be activities that are going to be distributed to students, and after that, then learning according to the regular schedule is going to begin. So I'm not going to say it's ideal, but we've also acknowledged that even remote learning is not the ideal. We are absolutely doing the best that we can with the time, the resources, and the staff that we have available. And that is all, Mr. Williams.
Okay, thank you. We're down to committee reports. We had a Buildings and Grounds Committee meeting prior to this meeting. Mr. Ruffalo.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. I'll be brief. We did discuss the 2019 project closeout, and we're sure that that project is approximately 99.9% completed. As far as 2020 is concerned, as you can see, some of the great work that happened over the summer is completed. We're down to approximately 25 to 40 punch list items that should be finished up within the next week. I'll let Mr. Keeley kind of elaborate a little bit more during his report on all the great work. And then we did start talking about 2021. Hopefully 2021 will get us back to some kind of normalcy in our lives. And with that, we are thinking ahead and thinking about what we need to continue to do to improve this great district. And some of the things we talked about were library renovations at Lincoln and Lake Park schools, the potential of doing upgrades there, the staff lounge at Stone School, possible renovations there, along with the band and orchestra rooms here at Indian Trail Junior High. The new chiller that operates this whole facility needs to be replaced. That's potentially on the list. And, the yearly task, it seems like, of seal coating and pavement maintenance and some sidewalk work throughout the district is finally one more thing that we're talking about doing in 2021. And then some of the great things that our in-house staff facilities department has been able to do throughout the district. They painted 25 classrooms, bathrooms, hallways, gyms, and entrances. Patched and painted, I should say. They did a lot of furniture removal, over 45 classrooms, and moved some classrooms around, brought some new furniture in. They also instituted a preventive maintenance program for our HVAC equipment, along with new security installation at all locations, trying to make our facilities more secure, fewer false alarms, and state-of-the-art camera integration. Also here at Indian Trail, new boiler was put in place. The old one was cracked, and I think finally we'll just end it with things like outside lighting at our schools. We're still looking at replacing fixtures, the old fixtures with new LED fixtures, doing some reconfiguration, taking care of some of these dark areas at schools. So right now, we've got 3 schools that we're pretty comfortable with, and we're continuing on with all of our facilities as far as outside lighting goes. And with that, you've probably noticed there's a lot of sprinklers going on, especially here at IT, Army Trail, some of the other schools. We did take down some of the real overgrown bushes, shrubbery, trees, just to make sure that our facilities are secure, no areas that could be hidden behind. And then for now, we did put some grass down. So we're kind of thinking of coming back in some of those areas with some shrubbery, some smaller bushes, decorated a little bit. But for now, we just knew we had to get rid of some of these unsafe, what we thought were, we were told that were deemed unsafe areas. And I believe that's it. If anybody else on the B&G committee want to chime in, feel free.
Any questions from the rest of the board?
I'm not
looks
sure if
good.
it's appropriate to talk now or during Mr. Keeley's presentation of 2021, but I know a few months ago we mentioned putting in priority of what we were thinking about doing in the future, just because of the scare of the CPI being at 0%, being on the budget committee. And I know we're not meeting until next month, but I'm not sure if the budget, building and grounds can do that for us as we think about that, as we make those decisions. But I know it is something we have talked about before.
We're going to go out for bid in October, so we'll have those figures back for our November meeting, and we can discuss whether or not that fits into next year, and we'll have our feet better on the ground, I believe, from a budget point of view.
And keep in mind, these projects that we're looking at, any one of them or all of them could be taken off the table, but obviously we, hoping that doesn't happen because we want to keep moving forward with all this work we've been doing and keeping the buildings up and running and looking good. But, yeah, we understand it. We just get to kind of decide what we'd like to do, but you tell us if we can afford to do it, so.
Well, the big thing we talked about is after the bidding is continuing the projects that we have started that we should complete, and then, safety and so forth. But at least that way we can be somewhat conservative with the unknown coming up ahead with the CPI. But again, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you, Mr. Ruffalo. We're down to administrative reports. Superintendent Langton.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. So to begin with, before I get into my report, I did want to thank everybody, including our board members, our administrative team, all of our staff who have contributed to all of the work that we've put in to prepare to return to learning with our students. Certainly, these are not normal circumstances, and we have done everything that we can to take the resources that we have available and provide the optimal opportunities for our students.
I'm sorry, Mr. Langton. I'm hearing two of you right now, and I don't know if that's technical or just in my head.
I apologize. We are having a little technical glitch with our new equipment in our boardroom. So I will continue while Mr. Keeley tries to troubleshoot. So again, our challenge was to not reinvent teaching and learning, but to provide our students with opportunities in the short term, and those would certainly be our short-term goals, to make sure that we return to learning as quickly and as efficiently as possible. Our long-term goal, as I stated at our last meeting, is to return our students to in-person learning as soon as possible, as soon as the guidelines allow, and we can do that in a safe manner. I appreciate all of the hard work as we return with staff tomorrow for our training days for the next 3 business days. There's been a lot of adjustments and accommodations that have gone in to preparing our facilities to make sure that it's safe for our employees to return to work and so that we can prepare for students for next week. I also want to say thank you and maybe even an apology to our parents for making the efforts that they have last spring and also currently to help prepare their students or their children for learning. And I recognize as a parent that that's really challenging because these experiences are different than anybody has ever experienced, including the adults. And so we're doing this together, and it's certainly a team effort. I also want to thank all of the other partners that we have, whether it's child care centers, the Addison Park District, Addison Trail High School and High School District 88. Everybody is truly trying to collaborate the best that we can for the benefit of our community and our children. The last thing that I wanted to mention in my report before I just review the Freedom of Information requests is the fact that the DuPage County Health Department has been especially collaborative with trying to help our public schools in DuPage County make the best decisions possible. I can share with you that they are awaiting final guidance from the Illinois Department of Public Health, and that they made the promise that this Friday we'll be receiving the final metrics that they're recommending the school districts use to make decisions about when it's going to be safe to return to school, or if more restrictive measures are necessary based on the COVID-19 experience in the area. And it's not just DuPage County, but the surrounding counties and this region of Illinois. So I will update our board members as I receive more information about that, again, hopefully late this week. And then just finally, we did have one Freedom of Information request that was listed in your packet. Were there any questions about that? Okay, that is all that I have, Mr. Williams.
Okay, thank you, Superintendent Langton. Mr. Keeley, you're up.
Thank you. So my update will be very brief. Mr. Ruffalo provided information on the 2020 projects. We're living in part of that, seeing the fruits of our collective labor and our friends from ICI and Leggett and all the work that they've done. So excited to bring staff back into the building later this week. Just the looks on people's faces when they see these spaces, even going into the Ardmore ELC area. And then today when I came into the hallway here with Mr. Lang, holy cow, he could not believe it. And it's so nice, and it's cool to see where we're heading with this. Again, as Mr. Daniels said, provided that the external factors impacting our revenue go in the direction that we would like. But again, the beauty of this process is this could be a 15-year process, this could be a 5-year process. So we'll keep monitoring it, and the two committees will keep working together on that. And again, 2021 work, we're heading towards the end of that process. We had a really exciting meeting earlier where we looked at the new library spaces and some of the other renovations that are going to happen. So again, just very exciting, and we stand ready when things kind of go back to normal. In the business office, we are very fortunate that we do not have to go through the stresses that our curriculum friends go through. It's been business as usual. We're happy to help in any way we can. We do have a new staff member coming on board, Jen Bonema, starts with us on Tuesday, and that's our Director of Business and Employee Services, and that replaces a retirement, and we're very excited for that. So that's all I have this evening.
Any questions for Mr. Keeley?
Dave, I actually had questions for John. You never opened it up for questions.
He asked you.
He did?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's okay, you can
I
ask.
apologize.
Sure.
So what I wanted to ask is, so this long-term, things seem to be rolling back. What are the plans? What are you working on to get us back? What do you think needs to happen? Because basically, until the state says we don't have to offer remote learning, it looks like it's going to be a problem. And this remote learning option, it might go on next year and the year after. You just don't know. And I was just wondering what plans are. What are the things that you're working on? I know you're working on, getting the school year going, but we had talked before, and I just, it's a concern, trying to get these kids back in class.
Yeah, it absolutely is a concern, Mr. Towns. I can tell you that we are anxiously awaiting the start of school with students remotely, because that's going to actually do one important test to every school district's network, so their backbone, their technology network, and the ability to broadcast Zoom meetings, these interactions between teachers and children in their homes. If that is successful, I will share with you that I will be very confident to bring kids back sooner, even in person and remote at the same time, because it may expand our capacity to be able to have teachers do both simultaneously. There are a few school districts that I'm aware of that are scheduled to try that later in September, and that also will serve as a good test. I believe that the biggest challenge that all school districts, and actually quite frankly businesses, will be facing is when employees either test positive or have COVID symptoms, the decisions that we have to make in terms of excluding those employees, that impacts our ability to safely have schools open to care for kids. And so that's probably my greatest concern, because I think the technology infrastructure should be able to be dealt with. I'm not going to say it's going to be easy, because Mr. Kuko in the audience would probably throw something at me if I said it was easy, but I do think that that's a hill that we can climb and get over. My concern is going to be the staffing piece, and I want to compliment our staff, because generally our employees have been incredibly favorable about returning to work and being actually appreciative of the fact that they can get back engaged with kids. That's really promising. The challenge is going to be if somebody either tests positive or has COVID symptoms. Based on the current guidance, it's going to make it really challenging to properly staff our schools. And again, those are barriers that we're going to work through so that we can get kids back in school, whether it's partially or fully.
Thanks.
Yep, thank you.
Okay, Mrs. Haney will now give us an update from the Teaching and Learning Department. Mrs.
Thank
Haney.
you. My report's rather short this evening. Just wanted to share, obviously, our 3 days of staff work days are very different and are going to look very different this year based on our situation. But it's very important that we have them so we can prepare them for a remote learning start. So all of our activities will take place in buildings, and they'll include a virtual welcome back from Mr. Langton from our Educational Development Council. We are going to allow grade levels and departments and teams to meet to allow time for teachers to plan and collaborate at their buildings. We will also be including many hours of professional development specific to technology platforms and implementation of our online resources. I did attach the agenda it's a general agenda, so then every principal has sent out a specific agenda to their staff members, because we need to utilize our instructional specialist staff so they can go to buildings and support teachers in their learning. Although we're looking through a very different lens this year, I think we're all very excited for the return of students. So it's going to be a good start, just very different. We did earlier this month, our instructional specialists offered multiple professional development opportunities earlier this month to our staff members. They were voluntary PDs. Teachers received CPDUs, so that goes towards their licensure renewal for their attendance, and we had quite a good turnout, so that was very exciting. Some of the things that they worked with teachers on were Screencastify, virtual classrooms, Seesaw, how to formatively assess students in a virtual classroom, Pear Deck, and Google Sites. They also provided support during new teacher orientation, so they spent about a half a day with our new teachers to work on the review and introduce the technology platforms and also online resources. So just really want to put a thanks out there to our IS team for supporting our teachers, and our teachers for being very open to spending their time learning about how they can make instruction more meaningful for our students remotely. And then I did attach the final remote learning plan and parent presentation for your review. And if you have any questions regarding these documents, please reach out to Mr. Langton or me. And that's all I have.
Any questions for Mrs. Haney?
I have one. With the teaching situation with the virtual learning, we're using Zoom, we share the screen. Do we have the option technology-wise to provide our teachers with a second screen so we can split the screens? Because we're going through that, like, we're learning on the fly with this stuff too.
So
And I've found that having two screen has been a tremendous advantage with teaching in the virtual complex.
I think Mr. Daniel snuck into my office and read my weekly update to the board for later this week. Thank you for asking that question. And thank you to actually Dr. Losi, who had asked earlier this week if we could consider giving teachers the option of having that second monitor, because Mr. Daniels is absolutely correct. One of the greatest challenges of doing any virtual meeting, Zoom, Google Meets, whatever, is if you're dealing with multiple documents on a small laptop screen, it's really challenging. So Dr. Losi did survey all of our teachers and got a response, And Mr. Kuko received bids from vendors for purchasing monitors, and we actually are processing those decisions literally today. We are having a meeting about it.
With the one beams in the room, can we split the screen and share that with the one beam? So like you could throw the kids up on the wall and then you can use your laptop for your material?
Technically, yes, you could do that. You could use the projectors to do that. That's a really good point. Yep, definitely.
Any additional questions? Okay, thank you. We're down to action items. Superintendent Langton.
So our first action item for this evening is the acceptance of resignation requests. Mr. Wortman, could you review those, please?
I will, thank you very much. I am presenting to the Board of Education a list of resignations from Addison School District 4 employees. I am requesting that the Board of Education approve these requests this evening. I'm going to read the names in regards to the licensed personnel and also ESP. In the area of licensed personnel, we have a number of them. We have Melissa Burrows, Brianna Chesney, Mary Guzman, Tracy Krawcheck, Bridget O'Connell, Jennifer Pashap-Graham, Araceli Perez, Mary Rouse, Vita Salapsis, and Marjorie Amber Warrington. In the area of educational support personnel, we have Selena Arigan, Esmeralda Aviles, Kaylin Berry, Joanne Bezad, Brenda Gomez Hernandez, Caitlin Lively, Donna McLeod, Vanessa Rodriguez, Jamie Vasacek, Valerie Velasquez, Carla Villasenor, and also Carrie Williams. So I recommend that this request be approved this evening.
Is there a motion to accept the resignation request as presented?
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Serge, second by Jeremiah. Questions or discussion? Roll call, please.
Lang,
Yes.
Ruffalo,
Yes.
Towns, Williams.
Yes.
Aranda,
Yes.
Daniels,
Yes.
Frantrakis.
Yes.
Motion approved.
Our next action item is the approval of employment and also change of assignment requests. Again, Mr. Wortman, could you review those?
I will. Thank you again. I am presenting to the board for your approval the employment or the reassignment requests for the following people. Their names are outlined in your board docs, and they'll also be listed tonight. The employment list includes, in the area of licensed personnel, we have Catherine Figura, Sarah Hamawan, Marta Kazarowski, Penelope Osio Brown, Charles Soldner, and Giacomo Visconti. In the area of educational support personnel, we have Gregoria Arredondo, Janelle Bailey, Allison Baumgartner, Jennifer Bonema, Anina Cosentino, Jose Garcia, Sara Garcia, Gabriela Ramirez, Maritza Sagasudume, Anna Sacedo, Rachel Savage, Jasmine Villegas, and we do have one change of assignments, and that's Norma Sacedo. I am going to withdraw Brittany Lanzo from tonight's approval because she could not take the position. So I do recommend that these requests be approved this evening as well.
Is there a motion to approve the employment request as presented?
So moved.
Motion
Second.
by John, second by Jeremiah. Questions or discussion? Roll call, please.
Ruffalo,
Yes.
Towns, Williams.
Yes.
Aranda,
Yes.
Daniels,
Yes.
Frantrakis.
Yes.
Lang.
Yes.
Motion approved.
Next, we have our annual approval and recognition of tenure of licensed staff, and I'm going to ask Mr. Wortman to please explain that and then review those
Okay.
names.
So I am asking for a board approval regarding the recognition of the following district, Addison District 4 licensed educators who will successfully attain tenure as of tomorrow, Thursday, August 27th, 2020. We'd like to thank them in advance of their service to the students and families in Addison. There are two ways to get tenure. There is the traditional four-year tenure, and there's also a 3-year advanced tenure. So I'm going to read all the members of the ATA who did receive a tenure, or who will receive tenure tomorrow. For the ones who are in the 4-year tenure, we have Alma Correa, Caitlin Ballard, Carolyn Meyer, Dana Prendergast, Daniel Ford, Danielle Zaccarillo, Jennifer Fletcher, Jennifer Molina, Kirsten Kelly, Corinne Ostojek, Laura Rojunkas, Margaret Whiteley, Michael Opella, Nicole Acosta, Renee Schubert, Robert Provax, Sandra Connor, and Scott Farnan. For those teachers who did receive the 3-year Advanced tenure, they include Amanda Alagna, Eleni Metro, Melanie Lara, Sarah Reese, Susan Prado, and also Tara Corral. So we want to congratulate them in advance.
Is there a motion to approve the recognition of tenure of licensed staff as presented?
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Rudy, second by Zach. Questions or discussion? Roll call, please.
Towns. Williams.
Yes.
Aranda.
Yes.
Daniels.
Yes.
Franchakis.
Yes.
Lang.
Yes.
Ruffalo.
Yes.
Motion approved.
Our fourth action item this evening is the approval of a 403B plan amendment pursuant to the Bipartisan Budget Act of 2018. Mr. Keeley, could you please review that?
Thank you. The subject of this action item essentially explains what it is. It is an administrative act that we need to have the board approve this evening to align us with said act from 2018 that our third-party administrator, Howard Simon, picked up in their latest round of changes. It's not unlike the Press Plus that Chuck brings to the board for the policy updates. It's, again, it's merely aligning our plan with current legislation. No other change to the plan are being recommended at this time. Therefore, I do recommend the board approve the resolution to amend the 403B plan to align with the 2018 Bipartisan Budget Act as presented.
Is there a motion to approve the 403B plan amendment pursuant to Bipartisan Budget Act of 2018 as presented?
So moved.
Motion by Serge,
Second.
second by Rudy. Questions or discussion? Roll call, please.
Williams.
Yes.
Aranda.
Yes.
Daniels.
Yes.
Franchakis.
Yes.
Lang.
Yes.
Ruffalo.
Yes.
Towns.
Motion approved.
Our final action item for this evening is the waiver of the second reading of board policy updates and the approval. And I'm going to ask Mr. Wortman to review each of those.
Thank you again. As you remember, Press Plus came out in early July and provided districts with updates to policies regarding technology, timeout restrictions, and also, of course, the pandemic. The policy committee did review all of these updates and would like to waive the second reading and ask for approval to the changes suggested by the committee. If approved, the following policies would be changed due to the following reasons or criteria. So it is a short one, so it's not going to be that long. In regards to any kind of changes for legal requirement, the changes would affect policy 220, 180, and 345. In the area of addition to a policy, it would include policy 220, 190, and in regards to a written, we have a rewritten policy, and that would affect policy 180. We do have two new policies this year, or this month, that would include policy 340, and we also have a facial covering policy too, which Press Plus has told us that they would reach out to us to give us the exact location of where we'd put that in the policy manual. So that will be coming also. In regards to amending a policy, it would only affect one policy, and that would be 340. And the final one is a legal reference update, and that would be policy 740. So I recommend that the Board of Education waive the second reading and then approve the changes proposed by the policy committee this evening regarding Press Plus 104.
Is there a motion to waive the second reading and approve the board policy update as presented?
So moved.
Motion by Jeremiah,
Second.
second by Zach. Questions or discussion? Roll call, please.
Aranda.
Yes.
Daniels.
Yes.
Franchakis.
Yes.
Lang.
Yes.
Ruffalo.
Yes.
Towns. Williams.
Yes, motion approved. We're down to discussion items. Superintendent Langton.
Yes, sir. Please remember that our next regularly scheduled meeting of the Board of Education will be held right here at Indian Trail Junior High School on Wednesday, September 30th, and that will be a 7:00 p.m. meeting. Next, I would like Mr. Wortman to provide the board with an update on our school enrollment numbers for this school year.
Okay, so despite our remote nature of our instruction, along with the ongoing pandemic, the registration of our students has been quite successful, actually. The first week of August was dedicated to enrolling our kindergarten students, our returning students, and also any new students to the district. We did put in an appointment system to adhere to CDC and also the Illinois Department of Public Health guidelines. and it proved to be very successful. So we may utilize this method moving forward in scheduling families for registration visits. Our offices have also been busy as well enrolling students. So despite the fact that we had it in early August, there were some other families who were still continuing to enroll their students. Again, we did utilize the appointment system, and it really provided our families with a great deal of flexibility in regards to when they could come into the office. So as of today, we have 3,632 students who have begun the enrollment process. Exactly 200 have not fully completed it. So as of right now, we are 3,432 are completely enrolled. That doesn't mean that they have started, they're just enrolled. So we're actually quite thrilled with that number. So our office staff has been very diligent in regards to communicating with those families, those 200 families who have not yet fully completed the enrollment process. So in addition, all schools, as you know, have been communicating with families about the start of the school year and about specific directions on the beginning couple days of school for beginning next week. So keep in mind, these are families who have registered. We hope to see as many students next week when the instruction begins remotely. So there's my update.
Thank you, Mr. Wortman, and thank you to all of our parents and our school office staff who have worked hard to get our kids not just in the system, but getting them ready to start their learning this year. Next, I would like Mr. Wortman to please just talk a little bit about the annual parent-student handbook.
Exactly. So the 2020-21 Parent-Student Handbook is complete and is bound and is set to be distributed next week, beginning with, along with the Chromebook pickup and the Meet the Teacher. We have two right here, and they are also enclosed in your board docs. Each child will get one of these handbooks for them to take, for them to review with their families. So it is an annual, or it is a yearly requirement, and it has been updated to reflect all of the policy changes and any kind of administrative procedures that we have put in place for the upcoming school year. So happy reading for everyone.
And we encourage parents to make sure that they read through those so they understand our guidelines as well. Next, I'm going to ask Mr. Keeley to talk a little bit about potential service agreements with our professional contractors and possible amendments to address remote learning operations. Mr. Keeley.
Yes, thank you. So this is a continuation of a discussion that we had last month and that we had back in the spring as well when we went to a remote learning setup. The two biggest conversations that we've had have been with the bus companies. Of course, we have SEPTRAN for special education transportation, and we have First Student for regular education. In addition, we have our custodial contract and our food service contract. So what I'd like to do is, Mr. Langton and I, and as well as some of our staff, Ms. Grabowski and Mr. Dirk in our area, have been working with these contractors and really digging deep and making sure that we're doing our due diligence. So tonight's an opportunity to engage the board on each of these four contracts, just in a very brief discussion to make sure that our strategy and our path forward aligns with the board's, what the board's intent is. I can tell you that every day I get more and more information from some of my peers, and folks are all over the board from we are absolutely going to dig our heels in on this. If a contractor is not providing a service, we're not going to pay for it, to folks that are arbitrarily paying portions of existing contracts in spite of the fact that no service is being provided, no documentation is provided, et cetera. So again, want to make sure that we have ourselves on the right path. So I'll start with the easiest, and that's Arbor for food service. They've been incredibly collaborative, and myself and Ms. Grabowski have time and again had to drive the conversation towards, are we fulfilling our end of the bargain, as opposed to them pushing us on that. So our goal there is to continue an open dialogue with Arbor. We had some challenges this summer with the unemployment benefits being beyond what the weekly pay for their employees would be. And there's a couple of positions on their staff now that are such kind of lower hours that they're going to run into that. So We're working with them to try and accommodate, to try and assist maybe with meal delivery and things like that. And all those conversations have gone well. We do not at this time see any amendment necessary for that contract. But once we get moving in the school year and they start looking at the participation numbers, which directly impacts not only their billing but our reimbursement, we potentially would have a conversation.
What services are they providing now, and what will they provide going forward?
Sure, thanks. Great question. So over the summer, we ran the summer food service program. We had a special waiver from the state, as did many school districts, and we partnered with District 88, and we aligned our efforts to provide 5-day meal packs for our community, and it's a community program. Now that we're into the school year, it's more of a school-based program. It's tied directly to our students, but we're going to follow a similar format in that, provided the state approves our waiver, which is in right now, we will be doing 5-day meal packs on Wednesdays. I do believe we've continued to align our scheduling and our messaging with District 88. And one of the things that we're seeing now is if we do a midday food pickup, there's the potential that some families are either working at that time, not available. Certainly a lot of our students are going to be engaged in learning at that time. So we're going to be mindful and keeping in touch with our principals to see if we need to make adjustments or do a special early morning pickup. But that's essentially the extent of it. It should be a fairly turnkey process, and until we move to a hybrid, a full in-person learning, it should be something that we can accomplish with the current staff.
Any other questions?
Okay, so for ABM, for custodial services, as you're aware, the district made the capital investment to purchase the e-Mister machines, and we've got several in this building and one for each of our elementary buildings. We had conversations with ABM. They had originally proposed to the administration that we add nearly 3 FTE, 2.5 FTE, but in myself and Mr. Dirk's estimation, it was not valid. It was not a reasonable request because as we look at it, for instance, in our hybrid model, if we're not serving lunch on site, you are essentially giving back a bunch of FTE time, custodial time, where ordinarily they would be in the cafeteria for about 2.5 hours a day. And so we're really pushing back on them. I do know some of our neighbor districts signed amendments to their contract. The high school district, real close, signed a $600,000 amendment and then went to remote learning. So we've been very careful on that. And I can assure you that any amendment that comes to the board will be well documented and vetted out.
So they'll be still cleaning the buildings every day? Nothing will change other than the food service piece?
So for custodial, right now, they'll be doing a daily sanitization of spaces where staff will be, and they will be continuing their normal work. Without having students here, without having that lunch during remote learning, we have adequate FTE to accomplish that.
Is there a possibility to reduce FTE?
At this point, we do not see that because there is still much work to be done. There's always work to be done with custodial. If you were to walk through the building and everything were spotless, which would be very difficult to do when a building is used as much as this one, especially with construction finishing up, I would be surprised. So again, even during our B&G committee meeting earlier in the Commons, there's custodians going every which way. So especially at the beginning of the school year when we're bringing our staff back, I think that we have a pretty heavy task ahead, and I don't see a reason right now or an ability to make those cuts.
Yeah, and I also think, Mr. Towns, that since most of our elementary schools, the square footage of them really dictate typically one custodian per building. We have to have that one custodian there because the buildings are going to be occupied by adults, but they're going to be occupied. And their required touch points for sanitizing and cleaning, if anything, have increased. What has decreased, and Mr. Keeley spoke to this, is the fact that they're not having to clean that middle part of the day for the lunch cleanup, setup, et cetera. But during that time, they're stepping up their sanitization efforts. And we've seen that in our district offices literally since this whole thing started. Every day, I see our custodians come by and clean my doorknob, clean all the high-touch surfaces in our district office multiple times a day. And they weren't doing that, they've never done that before, other than in the evenings when they were cleaning.
Okay, so for transportation, we have students that have been outplaced through the special education program here that are going to be attending facilities that are open for in-person learning. Therefore, we've been very aggressive in re-engaging with Septran, who we currently have an amendment to our contract for. As you recall, we're paying a fixed daily rate, and those invoices are substantiated by payroll so that we can assure that the money is going towards supporting the staff so that they're ready when we do return. In addition, that amendment included a clause where they would reimburse the school district for any amounts that ISB does not reimburse us on the transportation claim. Ultimately, that comes to about 33%. So we'll be working with them on that. Now that we have students actually participating and utilizing their services, we've begun discussions with them. Rightfully so, they have requested that the district incur all fixed cost attributable to our contract since we are running routes. If you think about it, they need a bus router, whether they're running 10 out-of-district routes or all 30 of our special needs routes. So we tend to agree with that rationale, but we also we follow that auditing standard of trust but verify. So we're going to continue to ask that they provide the appropriate documentation, but I do want to get a sense from the board on what the board's thoughts are on that type of an arrangement. And I'm sorry, one last thing. We have started discussions about the idea that they're already providing operations with 10 routes, and because of the new standards from the CDC and Health Department, there is a high chance that some of those drivers, some of those 10 drivers may be pulled for a 14-day window. So again, we've talked with them about the idea of expanding our subpool. Typically, with a bus contract, it calls for 10%. We've started conversations where we would say, let's look at a significantly expanded subpool of maybe having twice as many drivers, so that if someone does go down, we can assure that our students are still able to get to school. And also, at some point when we do return to normal operations, that company is ready to fulfill the needs of our special needs students.
Any other questions for Mr. Keeley?
What about our regular transportation? Is that still talking about?
Next, does anyone have any questions about special ed before I move on? Okay. For first student, as you recall, we went back and forth with them quite a few times in the spring. We felt we offered a reasonable alternative that would at least give them some cash flow, but they were not interested in that really important provision where non-state reimbursed transportation costs would then be credited back to the district at a later date. As you may recall, the reimbursement proration on regular ed transportation is significant and has been for many years. And I feel that's part of the reason that First Student wasn't interested in that, especially again, as some of our peer districts are willing to make a commitment to pay a percentage of that transportation cost, even when there's no services. So we had a call with them last week. We received some more information from them. Again, unless we receive different direction from the board, Mr. Langton, myself, the administration, we're going to continue to insist that as long as there is no service provided, that any agreement we have with First Student will include that clause so that the district is made whole on the back end. We're not saying that we aren't willing to make payments. We're just saying that if the state does not fulfill their obligation, then First Student's going to be responsible for that. They're usually pretty brief. I could probably just record my voice and play it over and over again. But yeah, I feel for them as an industry. It's really difficult from a professional standpoint. There's a reason that school districts outsource this responsibility. We want to put our horsepower, so to speak, in the classroom. We want to hire quality teachers. We want to be able to teach our students. We don't want to be the best bus mechanics out there. And so we've outsourced that, and that risk is now with a for-profit company. And it's really hard to look at our taxpayers and say that we're gonna provide a monetary bailout, to a company that, you know, is making a profit off our contract. And, you know, there's a risk in doing business. They're crying wolf and saying, oh, well, you know, if you guys don't do this, maybe we won't be there when you start school up. Well, there's a need, for student transportation, and, you know, we've spoken to the attorney. If they default on the contract, we'll be going out to bid, and the board will, you know, have to award an emergency contract. There will be provisions, but, you know, for a $700,000 to $900,000 contract, it just does not seem wise that we would be providing supplementary payments without receiving anything in return.
I guess my frustration with them is the fact that if they would just come in with a reasonable request, I believe that we would consider it. And it doesn't appear that they are. They're just digging their heels in it, or am I getting it, or I'm wrong?
No, you're correct. The latest one just said, you know, give us 80% if you're remote learning. And if you do long-term remote learning and you say that for the rest of the school you're doing remote learning, then give us 50%. And the key to the SEPTRAN amendment for special education that I think the board really understood and believed in is the fact that it's all very transparent. And so if anyone came back and said, well, why did you spend that money? We can tie it directly to payroll. Again, First Student has been hesitant to provide that level of transparency. And so Mr. Williams and I had that conversation recently, and I explained that to the folks at First Student. I said, you know, there's other companies that we work with that have provided a high level of transparency. And if it's fair and it's equitable and it makes sense, then we're going to consider it. But just throwing percentages at us without any real justification is difficult. So, yeah, we've impressed that upon them, and we'll continue, and we'll not bring an offer back to you unless it's reasonable and well vetted.
Deb, do you know what the other, I guess, First Student customers, have you spoken to any other surrounding districts? What sort of agreements are they, what have they entered into with First Student, or is it they haven't?
So that's the interesting thing is that, you know, we're all scrambling, you know, just like Donna with her peers, you know, how are you guys solving these issues? What are you doing? Mr. Daniel's talking about the extra monitor. You know, we're gathering information from each other. We're really working hard to try and make sure that we're staying in touch, and in my world, we do the same. So, yeah, like I said, every day, I'm in touch with my peers. We see the messages through the IASBO message board, and I can tell you that at this point, I'm not aware of too many people that have ratified an agreement. Even though our conversations with the contractor are typically, well, since you're one of the few districts in the state that won't agree to this, so it's really hard to have a conversation when it's not grounded in facts and figures, and it's more hypothetical. We're losing money, so please help us, right? So you know, in the spring, there were some folks that signed agreements where they said 80%. And every school district's different, and they're making their decisions for different reasons. For instance, a unit school district may have one contract for special ed and regular ed. So for them, it behooves them to find an agreement, because if it doesn't work out and that contractor goes away, they have serious problems. But the state reimbursement process is different. If they're still running special needs buses, which they are, they're going to claim 100% of their fixed costs for special ed, which come at that 60%. So it's not nearly the hit that we're talking about. I mean, we're talking about nearly an 80% proration. And so that means, you know, for every dollar we're spending on regular ed, 80% of that is coming from the tax dollars here. So I think it's all over the board, and we'll see it continue to develop. And I think there's so much fluidity in how school's going to look in 6 weeks, 8 weeks, couple months, that, you know, until we have something, again, that really makes sense, unless told otherwise by the board, we're kind of at a standstill with them.
Thank you.
Any other questions on those issues? Okay, thank you, Mr. Keeley. Next item.
Mr. Keeley, could you review an update on our construction projects, please?
Sure. In your packet, you've got a nice pictorial overview of the projects. There's a written update with the ELC Ardmore information. As you can see, the flooring, ceilings, lights are at 100%. The sprinkler system's been tested. There's some minor items in terms of casework where I know for sure there's some solid surface parts in the Family Consumer Science Lab that came out of a factory that was shut down during COVID. And so we're still waiting on that. We're waiting on a few appliances. But all in all, we're very happy with where we're at right now. We're really happy with the look, the feel, and again, excited to share it with staff later this week.
Questions? Okay, thank you.
And following the meeting, board members, if any of you are interested in seeing the projects here at Indian Trail, I'd be happy to walk you around after the meeting. If you'd prefer, just let me know. Then our final discussion item, Mr. Williams, is communications to and from the board. And prior to this board packet being put together, there were no communications over this last month. And that is all that we have.
Okay, thank you. I have not received any additional blue cards. Is there any miscellaneous unfinished business to bring before the board this evening?
I have a question. Two things. First off, are we implementing some sort of a pre-screening thing for symptoms for employees that come in? Is that something that we're doing?
Absolutely. Thank you for asking, Mr. Frangidakis. So I will share a very short story. Originally, the guidance that we had received was that we could pre-certify employees once at the beginning of the year, basically asking them to make a commitment that they will report, self-report, if they do have any of those symptoms. We just found out late last week that there actually was additional guidance from the State Board of Education and the Illinois Department of Public Health that we need to do that daily. So my team got together really quickly and found a very easy solution. We're actually utilizing our Skyward information system through employee access for employees to certify. They can either do that through their logins on their computer, or many people are just downloading the Skyward app and doing it literally before they walk into work in the morning. And so that's the way that we're accounting for that. Okay.
It's streamed audio.
No, it's going to be posted after the meeting.
I understand that. So what I'm saying is your agenda said that this meeting was going to be streamed on YouTube.
It is going to be streamed on YouTube.
It said it would be streamed live on YouTube, and it has not been streamed live, so nobody could watch the meeting. I had to drive to my house here.
Okay, could I ask your name?
Brian Morrow.
Okay, Mr. Morrow, I did read your question, I did answer it. I'd be happy after the meeting to explain to you what that answer was.
No, I'd like to be addressed in front of the board, since you guys didn't follow your own agenda.
Mr. Morrow, we did follow our own agenda,
Your
and you,
agenda says that this meeting was going to be streamed live on YouTube. Was it streamed live on YouTube?
I already answered that question.
So your agenda was incorrect.
Mr. Morrow, the meeting is going to be streamed after it is,
Your agenda said the meeting would be streamed live on YouTube. Would you like me to pull up your agenda on my phone? I can show you. Would any of the board members like to address this?
Right now.
No?
I'm looking right now, I'm sorry. I'm slow on the screen.
Also available via YouTube at,
Yep.
I don't see live, man.
Doesn't say live.
well, I'll take that direction from Mr. Williams. I'd be happy to repeat the answer, that's not a problem. I would prefer that we first finish answering Mr. Frangidakis' question, and then we can go back to that, that's fine.
The other question I had is there any, I know this has come up before, have we had any discussions if it'd be possible to provide some sort of in-person instruction for our kids with special needs? I know that that's something that it's definitely important, I feel like.
I could not agree with you more. In fact, the number one group of parents that I've spoken with over the last couple of weeks has been the parents of our children with disabilities. What I will promise you, and I've promised these parents, is as soon as we are able to do that safely, that is our first priority. My heart goes out to a lot of these families because Having a child with special needs is a really challenging thing for a family. And then to have the carpet pulled out from underneath you and not have your school system be able to provide those services in the same fashion that they're used to is really challenging. And so what I can share with you is that Mrs. Diaz and many members of our staff, including teachers, have been communicating with families and trying to coach them along so that we can make sure that we support them. But I absolutely agree with you, that is a priority. It's our first priority because those children need the support that they deserve.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Morrow, in answer to you about the live streaming, it was supposed to be live streamed, and the reason we were hesitant is we were all told it was gonna be live streamed, and there was a technical error. So I apologize, but we're new in this right now, and it didn't happen.
And that's understood, but.
But that's my answer.
Okay, so I can't respond.
You can respond, but
Okay, and so what I'm saying is, that's understood, that there are technical problems. But one, then there should have been some notice rather than all of us sitting at home.
excuse me, the technical problem happened right when we started.
Yes, I understand that. And what I'm, okay. So you're telling me that we're ready to go to 100% remote learning, and you guys can't even stream a board meeting? with
No,
no
sir.
notice?
This boardroom was literally just finished this past week. This is a brand-new facility that was under construction all summer long. My staff just received training this week on these systems.
Okay.
The capacity of these systems,
You assured me in numerous emails after the July 29th meeting that you were completely ready to go to a remote and a hybrid program. You dismissed all my questions when I asked about the staffing and the requirements. So now less than
Mr. Langton, can we just go over his blue card question, please, and just move on?
Absolutely.
There's no point discussing what we're discussing at this stage.
would you like me to read it again?
school board doesn't want to hear what
No,
parents
sir,
have to say.
the process is you have a question, you fill out the blue card, and we do want to hear what you have to say, and we're about to address that. But there is a process, and that's what we're trying, excuse me, it'd be great if you'd let us finish as well. There's a process that we must follow. You are part of that process. At this stage, to be honest with you, sir, you had a chance to be here at the beginning of the meeting. We addressed your question, we're gonna address it again, and that's what we're about to do. There's no point going back and forth, because that's what you're trying to get at. We will answer your question.
So Mr. Morrow's public comment was, we were assured at the July meeting that both remote and hybrid learning were all planned for. Why are we missing the first 2 days of school for Chromebook and book handouts? We already lost the entire spring schedule. Why are we missing more? The kids have already lost enough instruction time without the district scheduling more. And my response, Mr. Morrow, was that you absolutely are correct in your second sentence that we are taking the first 2 days to distribute Chromebooks, but most importantly, and this was a request of not just a couple of board members, but also some parents and some staff members, that we provide the essential opportunity for kids to establish relationships in person with their teachers, if at all possible. Our school principals met early last week to look at what the options for that were. The reality is, starting tomorrow and then Friday and Monday, we have 3 days of consecutive staff training to make sure that they are prepared to implement remote learning to the best of our ability within the resources that we have. We are then going to be connecting with our students, and part of that is going to be picking up Chromebooks and curriculum materials, as you suggested, book handouts. But the most important part of that process is to give them the opportunity to see their teacher in person, introduce themselves, have that name-to-face connection, so that when, shortly thereafter, we're going to start full remote learning through a variety of virtual tools, they have a relationship. Because we recognize that learning math, learning reading, learning the content areas is critical, but it's very challenging to do if they don't have relationships. So that's the reason that we made that modification. It is not unlike what many school districts have done during the past 2 weeks. Many school districts actually moved the start of their year back by a week or a few days or whatever for that very reason. We are accommodating that next week. And that was the answer that I gave publicly earlier in this meeting. And that is all that I had, Mr. Williams.
Was there anything else, Mr. Morrow?
No, I think that, I appreciate the answer. I think that losing more instruction days for students who have already lost the entire spring is not the right answer. We had since March to plan for this, and at the July meeting, we were assured that everything was set for a full remote plan. So I don't understand why we're losing additional instruction days at the beginning of the year, given that we were already starting late due to the construction delays for the ELC, that we've already delayed our start of the year. So I think that we're
Since,
our kids.
since the July meeting, Mr. Morrow, we've had 2 special meetings where that question has been answered very clearly. At least I felt that it was very clearly. And
Did you assure me in multiple emails that after that July meeting, that my questions and concerns about whether or not we were ready for a remote or hybrid program were unfounded and had no issues, and you told me that everything was already planned for? So for you to tell me now that given 2 meetings after that you've changed your mind is disingenuous.
Well, I apologize, sir, but I don't feel it was disingenuous. I feel actually,
Well,
actually, I
dismissed
feel,
my concerns.
I feel that I was being completely upfront with my Board of Education when I explained why we were not able to fulfill that commitment that you're absolutely right, that I did make at the July meeting. The circumstances have changed. The circumstances have changed continuously.
What
I
has
haven't-
changed since the July meeting?
A lot.
The
A lot in the
state-
guidance.
The state plan hasn't changed, the phase hasn't changed, nothing has changed.
Oh, the guidance from the public health departments has changed significantly, sir.
The
And then
state
the other-
phase
the other
has not
challenge-
changed at all.
The other challenge that is facing all school districts, including those that are trying to implement any form of in-person learning right now, are the staffing changes.
Yes, and
Yes.
I asked you specifically about staffing, and you told me that staffing was completely under control. And at the July 29th meeting, Mr. Wortman actually entertained an idea from, I believe it was Mr. Daniels, about developing a program to bring in more teachers so that we could have more teachers and we could have a program to bring more teachers into the school.
Mr. Morrow,
and
we've
discounted
allowed
that.
a lot of latitude here for you to address the board out of sequence and everything. And we've gone way over your time limit on being allowed to speak. So I would suggest if you have those types of specific questions, that you come in and discuss them directly with Superintendent Langton.
I'm
as a-
addressing them here, Mr. Williams, because I have
Well,
attempted to address them
And,
with Mr.
and we're
Langton.
running a meeting, and it's a 3-minute limit per speaker, and I've allowed it to go way beyond that.
Okay, well then maybe in the future, I have included every single board member on every single email I have said to Mr. Langton, and not once have I gotten any response from a board member.
Because we hire a superintendent to respond. It would be pandemonium if individual board members started responding to questions. In fact, that's one of the comments I was gonna be making here shortly. I try not to respond to Facebook. There have been things posted on there that says that our administration doesn't respond to emails, which is actually not factual at all. Superintendent Langton has responded to in excess of 100 different, well over 100 emails from parents on their concerns and questions in this district. And for things to be posted like that to suggest that we're not responsive, I would hold the administration responsible if they weren't.
I do not post to Facebook, I have dealt directly with Mr. Langton.
I understand that, but
So, but if Mr. Langton is not responsive to my concerns, that is. where
maybe
the
it's
board-
just you're not getting the answers that you want to hear. Maybe that's the question, the issue.
Well, go through your email, Mr. Williams. Mr. Langton specifically told me that our school was ready to go to a hybrid program.
This conversation is done, Mr. Morrow.
Okay, thank you.
Is there any other miscellaneous or unfinished business to bring before the board? Hearing none, is there a motion to adjourn the Wednesday, August 26, 2020 Board of Education meeting?
Second.
Motion by John, second by Zach. Questions or discussion? Roll call, please.
Daniels.
Yes.
Frangidakis.
Yes.
Lang.
Yes.
Ruffalo.
Yes.
Towns. Williams.
Yes,
Aranda.
Yes.
motion approved, meeting adjourned. Thank you for coming this evening. I'm looking forward to it.